I was halfway through answering my morning emails when a deep, unfamiliar voice boomed across the open plan office. Lizzie? I looked up. The man wasn't asking. He was summoning. Daniel Cross, the brand new CEO, stood in the doorway to the main floor, framed in sunlight and arrogance. His tailored suit probably cost more than my car. Conversations around me faltered. A few coworkers glanced between us, eyes wide. Yes? I said, standing halfway. He smirked like a predator spotting easy prey. A word. Now. I followed him into the glass-walled conference room, my heels clicking on the polished floor. He didn't invite me to sit. Instead, he stepped to the head of the table, hands braced on the surface like a general addressing troops. Let's not waste each other's time, he said, voice carrying just enough for people passing by to hear. Your role here? Completely redundant. You're a waste of payroll. The words landed with deliberate cruelty. Around us, silhouettes paused just outside the glass, the office's silent audience. I kept my expression neutral, even as my pulse thudded in my ears. I see. Pack your desk, Daniel continued. Security will escort you out within the hour. No warning, no discussion, just a public humiliation dressed up as leadership. He expected outrage, anger, begging maybe, but instead I nodded once. Understood. He blinked, a fraction thrown. That's it? That's it, I said, my voice even. Because what Daniel Cross didn't know, what nobody in this building knew, was that 2 days ago I'd signed documents that made me the majority shareholder of this company. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that the sweetest victories aren't shouted in the moment. They're served later, slowly when the other person thinks they've already won. The truth was, I'd seen Daniel coming from a mile away. Not literally. I'd never met him before today. But I'd read enough about him in industry papers to know his type. Brash, aggressive, obsessed with power plays. And I'd known the moment the board announced he was replacing Mr. Chandler as CEO that my days here in my current role were numbered. What he couldn't possibly have known was that my role at this company had never been just about my job title. 2 days earlier, I'd sat in my lawyer's office, hands folded on a thick oak desk that smelled faintly of lemon polish and history. Across from me sat Margaret Sloan, a woman who had represented my family's business interests for over 20 years. The documents between us were neatly stacked, each page heavy with embossed seals. Once you sign here and here, Margaret said, tapping the final page, the transfer will be complete. You'll hold 62% of the company's voting shares. I stared at her, still slightly dazed. And you're sure this won't trigger any public filings yet? Completely airtight, she replied. Your uncle structured the sale through a private trust to avoid scrutiny. The board won't know until you choose to inform them. The pen in my hand felt heavier than it should have. With one signature, I'd have more control than anyone else in this building, even the incoming CEO. My uncle's words echoed in my mind. He'd told me years ago, patience, Lizzie. There will come a day when you'll need leverage. Don't waste it too soon. I signed. Margaret slid the documents into a locked leather folder. Congratulations, she said with the faintest of knowing smiles. Now, standing in the middle of the conference room while Daniel Cross announced my termination like a victory speech, I understood exactly what my uncle had meant. I didn't need to fight back now. I just needed to let him dig his own grave. I returned to my desk without a word. My team, well, former team, pretended to work. But I caught the furtive glances, the whispered what happened, behind cupped hands. I packed slowly, carefully, choosing only a few personal items. The ceramic mug Emma from accounting had given me last Christmas. The small cactus that had somehow survived my neglect. A framed photo of my parents, taken on the day my father cut the ribbon on the company's first warehouse. Security arrived, awkward and apologetic. As they escorted me to the elevator, I caught my reflection in the glass. Calm, collected, and, if I looked closely, just the hint of a smile at the corner of my mouth. Because I knew something Daniel didn't. The next shareholders meeting was scheduled for next Thursday, and this time, I wouldn't be attending as an employee. That evening, I sat in my apartment, the leather folder Margaret had given me resting on the coffee table. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal, the reality of it still sinking in. 62% of the company. I thought about my father, about the years he'd poured into building a business that valued its people, and about how quickly that culture had eroded under corporate arrogance. Daniel Cross had just made the mistake of underestimating me in front of the entire office. And I was going to make sure that the day I walked back into that boardroom, it wouldn't be to ask for my job back. It would be to take his. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I'd even made coffee. 2 missed calls from HR, 1 email marked urgent in all caps. Exit interview, mandatory attendance 10:30 a.m. I smiled to myself and slid the phone back onto the counter. Let them stew. They'd get nothing from me. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. The leather folder Margaret had given me sat beside it, the weight of it more than physical. Inside was the power Daniel didn't know existed, the 62% voting stake that made me untouchable once I decided to act. I opened my email and typed a short message to Margaret. We move next Thursday. Prepare the formal notice to the board. I'll sign in person. Her reply came within minutes. Understood. I'll have everything ready. Expect pushback once the notice is served. Pushback was exactly what I wanted. I didn't step foot in the office for the rest of the week. Instead, I spent those days in quiet preparation. Not the Hollywood kind, no dramatic stakeouts or last-minute miracles, but the slow, methodical gathering of ammunition. My first meeting was with Oliver Grant, an old friend from my operations days who now worked in logistics. We met in a tiny cafe 3 blocks from the office, away from curious eyes. He arrived wearing the same worried look I'd seen on several former colleagues' faces since the firing. "What the hell happened?" he asked as soon as he sat down. "Daniel's been strutting around like he just won a war." "He thinks he did," I said evenly. "I'm letting him enjoy the parade before the rain starts." Oliver leaned in, lowering his voice. "Lizzie, what are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," I said with a small smile. "But I need information, honest numbers, the ones Daniel isn't showing the board." His expression shifted from concern to understanding. "You mean the real turnover figures? The cost overruns? The missed deadlines?" "All of it," I said. "And any proof that his projections are smoke and mirrors." Oliver hesitated only for a moment before nodding. "Give me a couple of days." My next call was to a woman named Teresa Alvarez, a former HR manager who had resigned 6 months ago under suspicious circumstances. "I'm surprised to hear from you," she said when we met at a quiet wine bar that evening. "I heard Daniel canned you." "He did," I said. "And in the process, he gave me the one thing I needed, a reason to use what I've been holding on to." Her brow furrowed. "And that is control," I said simply. "And I want to rebuild the company the way it used to be. But first, I need the truth about how many complaints HR buried under Martin's and now Daniel's leadership." Teresa sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "You'll find plenty. I left because they wouldn't let me investigate 2 harassment cases, both swept under the rug. If you're serious, I can get you the files. I kept copies, for my own protection." "I'm serious," I said. By Friday, I had more than I expected. A spreadsheet from Oliver showing that voluntary turnover had spiked 43% in Daniel's first quarter. Internal memos from Teresa proving multiple HR complaints were closed without proper review. Email chains between Daniel and the CFO discussing creative accounting for quarterly reports. None of it was sensational tabloid material. It was worse. Boring, undeniable, corporate malpractice. The kind the board couldn't ignore without exposing themselves. That weekend, I didn't celebrate or gloat. I worked. I went through the documents page by page, organizing them into a binder with neat tabs. Finance, HR, operations, projections versus reality. Every number, every complaint, every email was backed by a source. No embellishments, no easy denials. Margaret called late Sunday evening. "I've prepared the notice," she said. "Once you sign, it will be sent by courier to each board member. The agenda is clear. Special meeting to review and appoint executive leadership." "Good," I said. "Send it first thing Monday." "You know they'll call you the moment they get it," she said. "I'm counting on it." Monday morning, my phone lit up before 9 a.m. with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text from an old board contact. "Lizzie, what is this? Is this a joke?" I didn't reply. The silence was part of the plan. The less they knew before Thursday, the more off balance they'd be when I walked into that room. That night, as I sat on my couch with the binder open in front of me, I thought about the first time I'd stepped into that building as a young analyst, clutching a fresh degree and a head full of ideas. Back then, the company had been different. My father used to say, "A company is just people with a purpose." Somewhere along the way, that purpose had been replaced by ego. Daniel Cross had no idea that when he'd called me a waste of payroll in front of the entire floor, he'd also handed me the perfect opening line for Thursday's meeting, because I planned to repeat it, word for word, and then show them exactly what payroll waste really looked like. By Tuesday morning, the storm was beginning to gather. The board still didn't have the full picture, but the notice Margaret sent had done its job. Panic was starting to ripple behind closed doors. I knew because my phone had lit up half a dozen times before breakfast with calls from numbers I recognized. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went to meet with Caroline Webb, a woman whose reputation in the corporate world was something between a scalpel and a hurricane. She was a governance consultant, the kind boards called when they needed problems handled quietly. I had hired her 2 years ago for a side project, and we'd stayed in touch. Caroline arrived at the hotel lounge where we agreed to meet, her dark hair pulled back, her leather briefcase looking heavy enough to double as a weapon. "Lizzie," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Margaret gave me the broad strokes. I need details." I handed her the binder. "Everything in here is verified. Turnover data, buried HR complaints, financial misstatements. I'm not interested in smearing Daniel. I want a factual case strong enough to stand on its own." She flipped through a few pages, her brows lifting slightly. "You've got more than enough. This isn't just bad leadership. It's fiduciary negligence. If the board ignores this, they're exposing themselves legally." "That's the point," I said. "They can't just wave it away." Caroline closed the binder and looked me dead in the eye. "Thursday is going to be ugly. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready since the day he fired me." After Caroline left, I sat for a moment with my coffee, thinking about the version of myself who had walked into that conference room last week and been dismissed like an inconvenience. That version of me had smiled politely and walked away. This version was coming back with the majority of the company in her pocket. By Wednesday afternoon, the whispers had grown louder. An old colleague, Maya, texted me, "Daniel's on edge. He canceled 2 meetings today and shut himself in his office. What's going on?" I typed and deleted my reply 3 times before settling on, "Just tell him Thursday will be interesting." That night, I met Oliver in the same cafe as before. He slid a USB drive across the table. "That's the raw server log for Q2 reports," he said quietly. "You'll see what we actually made compared to the fantasy numbers Daniel's been feeding the board." I didn't have to look yet to know it would be damning. I'd already seen enough in the partial data to know revenue had been flat, if not declining. "Oliver," I said, "why are you helping me?" "This could blow back on you." He shrugged, but his eyes were hard. "Because this used to be a place worth working for. If you can bring that back, it's worth the risk." Thursday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of day that tricks you into thinking nothing bad could happen. I dressed deliberately. Navy suit, white blouse, no jewelry except for my watch. Professional, unshakable, neutral. A mirror image of the woman Daniel thought he had erased from the company. Margaret met me in the lobby of the building. "They're all here," she said in a low voice, "and they've been talking to each other since 8 a.m. "Good," I replied. "Let them talk." It'll make what's coming harder to swallow. As we stepped into the elevator, I could feel the shift in my own breathing. Calm, measured, almost like standing backstage before a performance. When we entered the boardroom, the conversation cut off instantly. The long oak table gleamed under the recessed lighting, and every leather chair was filled. Daniel sat at the far end, his posture stiff, his jaw tight. "Well," he said, his tone almost mocking. "This is unexpected." I placed my folder on the table and sat at the head seat without asking. The air shifted. "This meeting," I began, "was called under the authority of the majority shareholder." Several board members exchanged quick glances. One of them, Mr. Redmond, cleared his throat. "Majority shareholder? Lizzie, what are you talking about?" I slid the ownership documents forward. 2 days before my termination, I finalized the purchase of 62% of this company's voting shares. It is a private transfer, legally binding, and filed in accordance with corporate governance. A hush settled over the room. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said. "And I called this meeting for one reason, to review the current executive leadership." The rest of the meeting was scheduled to be procedural, but I knew the real showdown would come after I presented the evidence. That was when the facade Daniel had been wearing since the moment I walked in would crack. For now, I kept my voice steady, my words simple, and my cards close. I wanted him to feel the walls inching in without seeing the hammer until it dropped. And when it did, I wanted it to be so undeniable that even his allies on the board wouldn't be able to save him. As I left the building that afternoon, I passed Daniel in the lobby. His expression was tight, but there was a flicker of something else there now. Uncertainty. He still thought he had time to get ahead of me. He didn't realize Thursday was just the beginning. The boardroom was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. I sat at the head of the table, the ownership documents spread neatly before me, and let the pause stretch just long enough to make every eye in the room stay on me. "As majority shareholder," I began, "I'm exercising my right to call for a formal review of the current executive leadership. That includes the position of CEO." Daniel gave a short, derisive laugh. "This is absurd. You're making a spectacle of yourself, Lizzie. You've been gone a week and you think you understand what's needed at this level?" I met his gaze evenly. "I understand more than you think, and I have data to back it up." I opened the binder I'd brought, the one I'd spent nights assembling with Oliver's and Teresa's help, and slid the first packet across to the board secretary. "These are the actual Q2 revenue numbers pulled directly from our internal server logs. They don't match the figures presented in the last board report." The secretary glanced at the first page, then looked sharply at Daniel. "They're taken out of context," Daniel said quickly. "Normal accounting variances." 47% variance? I asked, my voice still calm. "If that's normal, then this company is in worse shape than I thought." Mr. Redmond, one of the senior board members, cleared his throat. "Daniel, that's a significant gap." "It's a timing issue," Daniel insisted. I didn't argue. Instead, I passed out the second set of documents, HR complaint summaries. "This," I said, "is a list of formal employee complaints filed in the last 9 months, none of which were investigated according to policy. Several involve serious allegations that were closed without resolution." One of the newer board members, Ms. Carter, frowned as she flipped through the pages. "These are serious. Why weren't we made aware?" "Because," I said, turning my attention back to Daniel, "the complaints were buried. You signed off on at least 2 of them personally." "That's not—" "Your signature is on the closure forms," I interrupted, keeping my tone even. Page 12. There was a rustle of paper as board members flipped to the page. Daniel shifted in his seat, the confident smirk gone now, replaced by the first signs of strain. I let the weight of the documents hang in the air for a beat before moving to the final tab in my binder. Projections versus reality. "These," I said, distributing the last packet, are side-by-side comparisons of Daniel's public growth projections versus actual performance under his leadership. Revenue is flat. Market share has dropped 2 points in the last quarter alone. Employee turnover in key departments is up 43%, and yet executive bonuses increased by 15%. For a moment, the only sound was the turning of pages. When Mr. Redmond finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. "Daniel, this is troubling." Daniel's hands tightened on the table. "She's twisting numbers to make her personal vendetta look legitimate. None of this is actionable." I leaned forward slightly, my voice quiet but carrying. "This isn't personal, Daniel. This is governance, and the board's duty is to act in the best interest of the company and its shareholders. I happen to be the majority shareholder, which means this motion doesn't need a second vote to pass." The words seemed to land like a physical blow. A few board members exchanged looks, some leaned back, their decision already made. I picked up the final sheet of paper in front of me. The formal motion to remove Daniel Cross as CEO effective immediately. As majority shareholder, I cast my vote in favor. I said, 62%. Motion carries. For a moment, no one moved. Then the board secretary cleared his throat. "In accordance with company bylaws, the motion stands. Daniel, your termination is effective upon this notice." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is a joke," he said, his voice rising. "You won't survive a month without me. The company will fall apart." I closed the binder calmly. "It's been falling apart with you." Security didn't have to be called. He gathered his things in jerky movements, avoiding everyone's eyes. As he reached the door, he turned back to me. "You have no idea what you're doing." I met his gaze one last time. "I know exactly what I'm doing." The door shut behind him with a soft click. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer before Ms. Carter broke the silence. "Well, that was unexpected." Mr. Redmond looked at me over his glasses. "Lizzie, I'll be honest. I didn't know you had this kind of leverage. But if even half of this data is accurate, the board had no choice." "It's accurate," I said simply. The meeting moved on to procedural matters, appointing an interim CEO, reviewing immediate operational priorities. But I barely registered the details. My focus was on the shift I could feel in the room. When I'd walked in, I was the outsider, the ex-employee making a scene. When I walked out, I was the person holding the future of the company in my hands. And that was only the beginning. The door clicked shut behind Daniel, and for a long second the room felt too big and too quiet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even move. I just let my shoulders drop a fraction, the way you do when the thing you've been bracing for finally happens and your body hasn't caught up yet. "We still need to run the company," Mr. Redmond said at last, practical as ever. "Interim leadership." "I'll take responsibility for the transition," I replied. "But I don't want a coronation. We do this properly." Margaret nodded once beside me, reading my mind. "I'll circulate a resolution naming an interim CEO and an independent operating committee for 90 days. You'll chair the committee, Lizzie." "Fine," I said. "But the interim CEO should be someone who knows the business and doesn't want the job long-term." We landed on Richard Huang, our head of engineering, a soft-spoken builder with zero appetite for politics. He agreed on the spot, on the condition that the role be strictly temporary and that we put a real plan in place for the next quarter. It was exactly the kind of condition I wanted to hear. By the time we walked out of the boardroom, it was early afternoon. The lobby felt different. Quieter, but somehow cleaner. I didn't go to the corner office. I asked facilities to open the main hall instead. "Town hall in 30, I told the receptionist. "Invite everyone. Floor staff, interns, custodial, contract workers, nobody off the list." I took a breath in the empty hall and listened to the hum of the vents. My father used to test the acoustics here by clapping once and counting the half-echo. I did the same, quietly, and the sound came back small and clear. Good. No theatrics. Just sound carrying without strain. When people started filing in, they did it cautiously, like they weren't sure if this was mandatory or a trap. I stepped to the front with no microphone and no slides, just a stack of papers under my arm and a glass of water. "Some of you know me," I began. "Some of you saw me escorted out last week. Both things are true." A ripple of nervous laughter broke, quick and human. "I'm not here to make a speech," I said. "I'm here to be accountable, and to ask for yours. Today, the board removed the CEO. Effective immediately, we have an interim leadership structure for 90 days. During that time, bonuses for senior executives are suspended. We're hiring an independent firm to audit the last 3 quarters and to review every HR complaint closed in the last year. We'll publish the outcomes internally. No names, but real actions." Heads lifted. Not celebration. Attention. "If you filed a complaint and felt ignored," I continued, "we will contact you. If you left because you were dismissed or overlooked, expect a call if we need you back. It won't fix everything overnight, but we start today." I didn't give them a slogan. I gave them a phone number. A reinstated ethics line routed to the external auditor, not to HR. A QR code on the screens for anonymous input. A simple email. rebuild@company.com, monitored by me and 2 outside counsel with whistleblower protection experience. It wasn't flashy. It was infrastructure. At the end, I said the line I had promised myself I would say only if I'd earned it. Last week, I was called a waste of payroll. I want you to know what payroll is to me. Names, not numbers. If we can't say your name and what you do well, we don't deserve your work. There was no applause at first. Then there was. Not loud, not performative. Just enough to tell me people had registered the difference between a show and a plan. The next days were unglamorous. We canceled a ridiculous executive offsite that had been booked at a mountain resort. That money paid for back pay owed to the warehouse team for overtime miscalculated under a pilot scheduling program. We shut down 2 vanity projects in marketing and redeployed their budgets to hiring 3 desperately needed support engineers. When the audit firm asked for access, we gave them everything. Every server, every folder, every inbox under legal hold. I told them on the record, "If you find something that makes me look bad, include it." Oliver came by my desk. Just a normal workstation on the 3rd floor I had borrowed while the interim structure held. He looked at the monitor, then at me. "You're really doing it," he said. Not a question. "Slowly," I said. "The only revenge that lasts is the kind that improves things." He grinned at that. "You're going to put that on a mug?" "No," I said. "I'm going to put it in payroll." On Tuesday of the following week, an email went out. HR was reopening cases. Teresa, who had left rather than be complicit, agreed to return as an external advisor to rebuild the function with clear standards and timelines. She asked for one non-negotiable: final say on whether cases could be closed without action. I gave it to her, with board oversight. Investors wanted a call. I scheduled it for Friday. No spin. "We're restating Q2, I told them plainly. Not because we failed, but because we refuse to lie. Our path forward is boring. Better retention, better products, realistic targets. There was a beat of silence, then a few tough questions. And then, unexpectedly, 2 funds asked about increasing their positions if we hit the new lower guidance. Reality, it turns out, is investable. The day the audit report came back, I read it in a conference room with the blinds half drawn. It was worse in places than I'd hoped and better in others than I'd feared. We published the summary to staff with the actions already attached. Reimbursements for misallocated travel, clawbacks where permissible, training where necessary, termination where justified. Names kept private, remedies public. I walked the floors more in those weeks than I had in the last year. I learned the names of the night cleaning crew. I sat with the support team on a Saturday morning and listened to the scripts they'd been forced to use, the ones that had them apologizing for defects they didn't cause. We wrote a new script together. Shorter, honest, backed by a promise engineering signed. One evening, passing the whiteboard by engineering, I noticed new handwriting. Someone had written, "We stopped whispering." Underneath, someone else had added, "We started fixing." I stood there longer than I meant to. It was not profound poetry. It was better. Measurable culture. On the 90th day, we gathered the board again. Richard gave back the interim badge with relief and a joke about getting to sleep again. We voted. Formally this time. I accepted the role of CEO because the work needed a spine, and I could offer mine. Then I did something I'd promised myself in the quiet. I asked for a performance review after 6 months conducted by the same outside firm doing the audit. Audit, with the results shared internally. Power is safest when it expects to be measured. I called another town hall. This time the seats filled faster. I wore the same navy suit from the day Daniel tried to humiliate me, not for symbolism, but because it reminded me that clothes are just fabric. It's the choices that make them mean anything. "I won't pretend the last months were easy," I said. "They weren't. Some of you lost managers you liked. Some of you had to relive things you'd rather forget. Thank you for telling the truth anyway." I paused, thinking of my father, of the ribbon he'd cut on that first warehouse, of the calluses on his hands that never quite went away even after he became executive. He used to say a company is just people with a purpose. I finally understood the sentence he didn't say out loud. The purpose is to make people better, not smaller. "If there's a message in all of this," I said, "it's simple. Leadership isn't volume and revenge isn't ruin. Leadership is accountability, and revenge, if you insist on calling it that, is the choice to rebuild what someone else tried to break." Afterward, Maya from Ops found me in the aisle. "Do you think Daniel knows?" she asked softly. "How this turned out?" "I don't know," I said. "And I don't need to." That night, alone in the office, I finally went up to the corner room. I didn't change the desk or the windows. I did replace the photographs on the wall with images from the shop floor and the help desk and the warehouse. On the credenza, I set one frame. My father and me at that first ribbon cutting, both of us squinting into the sun, proud for reasons I could not have named then. I opened the latest report. Revenue was up, modestly, honestly. Customer satisfaction had climbed. Turnover had slowed. None of it was meteoric. All of it was real. There was a soft knock. "Come in," I said. Teresa stood in the doorway holding a slim folder. "Final update," she said. "We've cleared the backlog. People are starting to trust the process again." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. She hesitated. "You okay?" I looked around the room, at the city, at the work. "I am," I said. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just steady. "We're okay." When she left, I closed my laptop and let the quiet expand. The revenge everyone wanted to see, the dramatic kind, the kind with fireworks, had already happened the day the door clicked behind Daniel. What mattered afterward was the choice I made next. I chose to build. The first thing I noticed wasn't the smell of fresh coffee in the lobby or the chatter of coworkers arriving for another Monday morning. It was the sight of 3 black garbage bags sagging against the marble wall, bulging with what I instantly recognized as mine. My potted fern, dirt spilling from the tilted ceramic pot. A half-crushed photo frame of me and my mother. A tangle of charging cables. Even the bright yellow coffee mug I'd brought from home, the one with "World's Okayest Employee" written on it, sat lopsided on top like some cruel joke. For a moment, I just froze. The air felt too heavy, like someone had yanked all the oxygen from the room. My carry-on bag, still rolling behind me from last week's client trip, thudded against my ankle when I stopped walking. Then his voice cut through the lobby. "Lisa, perfect timing. We're downsizing. Get out." It was my manager, Greg. His tone wasn't sharp or angry. It was casual, almost rehearsed, as if he'd been waiting all weekend to deliver this line. He stood there in his pressed navy suit, gold watch glinting as he checked the time, like he was already late for something more important. "You're 25, he added with a smirk as if it explained everything. "You'll bounce back." The words hit harder than the bags at my feet. Behind him, a half-circle of colleagues had formed, pretending to be busy. Some avoided my eyes, tapping on their phones. Others watched openly, like spectators at a street fight. I caught sight of Marcus from accounting, his mouth twitching like he was fighting a grin. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to remind them all of what I'd done last week. Flying across the country on 2 days' notice, negotiating with a difficult client, pulling a deal back from the brink. The contract I had closed was worth millions to this company. And now? My reward was seeing my life stuffed into garbage bags like last week's trash. But instead of saying any of that, I just stood there, the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. "Security will escort you out if you need help with those," Greg said, already glancing at his phone again. "Your access card's been deactivated. Separation paperwork will arrive by email. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I bent down, my hands trembling as I gripped the slick plastic of the bags. The wait was awkward, humiliating. Not a single person stepped forward to help. Not even Naomi, the one I used to have lunch with every Friday. She stared at the floor tiles like they might crack open and swallow her whole. As I straightened with the bags in my arms, I caught Greg's expression. A flicker, the corner of his mouth lifting, just slightly. Satisfaction. That's when I knew this wasn't about downsizing. This was personal. I shuffled through the lobby, my shoulders burning under the strain, my carry-on wheels squeaking against the floor. Whispers trailed behind me like smoke. A few people slowed down to watch me leave, their eyes gleaming with curiosity, as though I were the morning's entertainment. When my planner slipped from one of the bags and fanned open on the floor, pages of color-coded notes, client schedules, meetings lined up for the next 3 months, I didn't even stop to pick it up. I left it there, a splash of order in the middle of chaos. Outside in the parking lot, I shoved the bags into my trunk, my arms aching. Then I sank into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. That was when something strange happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't peel out of the garage in a blaze of rage and rubber. Instead, I smiled. Not the brittle kind of smile you force in front of people, but a calm, knowing smile that rose from somewhere deep inside me. The kind of smile that said, "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've just started." I raised my hand and waved once, through the windshield, through the glass doors of the lobby where I could still see their faces pressed against the windows, watching. Then I put the car in reverse and drove away in silence. That night, I sat at my mother's kitchen table, steam curling from a chipped mug of chamomile tea. I recounted everything, every humiliating detail, while she listened with her lips pressed thin. "Something doesn't add up," she finally said, her voice steady. "You closed a major deal. Why fire you right after?" The question kept me awake long after she'd gone to bed. Why now? Why so sudden? Why with garbage bags instead of a conversation? I didn't have the answer yet. But 1 week later, my phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up again and again. First one message, then 10, then 30. By noon, there were over 100. "Lisa, where are you? We need to talk now. This is urgent. Call me back. Where are you?" The same manager who had smirked as I hauled garbage bags out of the building was now blowing up my phone, desperate. I stared at the screen, my lips curling into that same quiet smile I'd given him from the driver's seat a week earlier. He had no idea what he'd unleashed. The first time I actually opened Greg's messages, it was late at night. The glow of my phone, the only light in my mother's small kitchen. I'd ignored him all day, letting the notifications pile up until the buzzing had become white noise. Now I scrolled through them slowly, one by one. "Lisa, please pick up. It's urgent. Where are you? We need your files. Do you still have the Henderson notes? Call me back. This is a disaster." The panic in his words was almost laughable. The same man who had stood in the marble lobby, tapping his watch, smirking at my humiliation, was now begging for my help. My mother, sitting across from me with her sewing kit in her lap, noticed my expression. "What is it?" she asked. I turned the phone toward her. She adjusted her glasses, read a few of the frantic texts, and let out a sharp breath. "So now he remembers your worth?" she muttered. Typical. I leaned back in my chair, the memory of that morning still raw. The garbage bags, the whispers, his smug face. And yet, here he was, 1 week later, desperate. Something was unraveling, and I needed to understand what. The next morning, I opened my laptop for the first time since being fired. At first, I thought about job hunting, polishing my resume. But instead, my fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing something else entirely. Client contact list. From memory, I began writing down everything I knew from the past 3 years. Names, direct phone numbers, preferences, inside jokes, pain points. Information I had carried in my head, not on the company servers. Information that Greg couldn't wipe or stuff into garbage bags. By the time I stopped, I had 4 full pages. It struck me then. I wasn't powerless. Greg hadn't fired an employee. He'd thrown away the one person who understood the very clients keeping his department alive. That realization settled over me like armor. At noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said answer. "Hello? Lisa?" The voice was familiar, deep, steady. "This is David Henderson." My breath caught. Henderson. The CEO I had flown out to Phoenix to meet just 10 days earlier. The deal I had closed. The one worth millions. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," I said carefully, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been trying to reach you through your office," he said. "But they keep telling me you're gone, that you left suddenly for another opportunity. Is that true?" The words slammed into me like a cold wave. So that was the story Greg had fed them. "No," I said firmly. "I didn't leave. I was terminated, effective immediately." Silence stretched on the other end, and then Henderson exhaled sharply. "That doesn't make sense. I specifically told Greg we wanted you as our main point of contact moving forward. You know our operations. You built the solution. Why would they?" He trailed off, frustration clear. I could almost see it. Him sitting at his desk, realizing the company had lied. "Lisa," he said finally, his tone shifting. "Would you be available for lunch tomorrow? I think we need to discuss this directly." When I hung up, my hands shook. Henderson, calling me, not the firm, not Greg, me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Greg's smug voice in the lobby. "We're downsizing. You'll bounce back." And now the puzzle pieces were clicking into place. This wasn't about downsizing. This was about credit. I remembered the way Greg had hovered during the Phoenix meetings, adding nothing, just nodding at my talking points, repeating my phrases as if they were his own. He'd stood beside me in photos, his name plastered first on every slide deck. And when Henderson had requested me directly, that must have been the breaking point. Greg didn't want a star on his team. He wanted the spotlight for himself. And firing me right after closing the deal meant he could claim the victory alone. But clearly, his plan was already crumbling. The next day, I sat across from Henderson at a quiet corner table in an upscale downtown restaurant. He ordered coffee, black. I ordered tea, my hands wrapped tightly around the warm cup to steady myself. "I'll be blunt," he said once the server left. "Your former boss is in trouble. The implementation meeting yesterday was disastrous. The new hire they brought in had no idea what she was talking about. When we asked about the logistics model you designed, Greg froze. He couldn't explain it. Not one detail." My lips pressed together to hide the smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "We didn't sign with your firm for their reputation," Henderson continued. "We signed because of you. And now, frankly, we're considering pulling the contract altogether. His eyes locked onto mine. Unless what? I asked, my voice low. Unless you come on board. Not with them. With us. As an independent consultant. The offer hung between us like an open door. I should have felt triumphant. Vindicated. And I did. But more than that, I felt something deeper. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about choice. Greg had tossed me aside like I was nothing. But here I was, 1 week later, with the very client he thought he owned, offering me the chance to rebuild on my own terms. I didn't give Henderson an answer that moment. I just nodded slowly, my mind already racing with possibilities. When I left the restaurant, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Greg. "Lisa, please. We need you. Henderson is furious. Call me back." I slipped the phone into my bag without replying. For the first time since those garbage bags, I felt calm. Greg wasn't my boss anymore. He was just a man standing in quicksand, and every frantic text was proof he was sinking deeper. And this time, I had no intention of throwing him a rope. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, my mind buzzing with Henderson's offer. Independent consultant. It sounded powerful, freeing, but terrifying too. No steady paycheck. No HR department to hide behind. Just me. I sat at my mother's small kitchen table with a pad of paper making 2 columns. Pros. Freedom. Higher pay. Direct client relationships, no Greg. Cons. Unstable income, legal risks, Greg. Because of course, Greg wasn't done with me. My phone was proof. Overnight, he'd sent another 20 messages, each one more desperate than the last. "Lisa, we can work something out. Don't do anything rash, just call me. You're making this worse for yourself if you don't respond." That last one made my blood boil. Worse for myself? I hadn't done anything but work myself to exhaustion for 3 years. He was the one spiraling, and now he wanted me to feel guilty for it. I closed my notebook and pushed it away. I wasn't ready to decide yet, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't go back. By mid-morning, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number again. For a second, I thought it was Henderson, but the voice on the other end surprised me. "Lisa, it's Naomi." I paused. Naomi, the co-worker who had avoided my eyes that morning in the lobby. We used to eat lunch together every Friday. She sounded nervous, whispering like she didn't want anyone to hear. "I don't know if I should be calling you, but..." She lowered her voice further. "Something's happening here. Henderson's threatening to cancel, and Greg is blaming you. He's telling everyone you walked out that you're withholding files to sabotage him." I gripped the phone tighter. "That's not true." "I know," she said quickly. "A lot of us know. But Lisa, he's unraveling. He spent half the morning in his office shouting on the phone. Tristan from legal says the board is getting complaints. I just thought you should know." Her words sank in slowly. Greg wasn't just scrambling. He was panicking. And if the board was involved, this was bigger than one angry client. "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. Naomi hesitated, then added, "If you do something, if you fight back, just know some of us are rooting for you." That night, I pulled out my laptop again. Instead of wallowing or job hunting, I opened a fresh document. At the top, I typed, "Carson Consulting, draft plan." It wasn't much, just bullet points. Services I could offer, skills I had, names of clients who trusted me. But as I typed, the fear I'd carried all week began to loosen. I didn't need Greg. I didn't even need the firm. I had everything I needed in my head, in my experience, in my relationships. By midnight, I had the rough skeleton of a business plan. Nothing polished, nothing official, but something. A direction. And as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. This time, not a text. An email. From Greg himself. Subject line, URGENT, Henderson Implementation. I hesitated before opening it. "Lisa, this is out of control. We need you in the office tomorrow for the Henderson meeting. I'll make sure everything is smoothed over, but you need to come in. Without you, this is going to blow up. Don't throw away your career over hurt feelings. Greg. I stared at the screen, stunned by the sheer arrogance. Hurt feelings? Was that how he framed stuffing my life into garbage bags and marching me out of the lobby in front of everyone? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to fire back a scathing reply. But then I stopped. Number silence was louder. Silence forced him to panic more. Instead, I forwarded the email to Ezra, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in employment law. His reply came within the hour. Don't go back. Don't sign anything. They fired you. End of story. If they're desperate, it means you have leverage. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk options. Leverage. That word lit something inside me. The following day, Henderson called again. His voice was brisk, but there was a hint of impatience now. Lisa, I need an answer. We have another implementation meeting Friday, and I don't trust Greg's team to handle it. If you're in, I'll pay double what you made at the firm. Independent contract. No strings attached. My throat went dry. This was real. This wasn't a fantasy in my mother's kitchen. Henderson wanted me. Not the firm, not Greg. Me. I'll do it, I said before I could second-guess myself. Good, Henderson said. I'll have my assistant send over the paperwork. Friday morning, 10 a.m. Same office building. You'll come as our consultant. The irony hit me like a thunderclap. 1 week after being marched out with garbage bags, I would be walking back in. Not as an employee, but as the client's representative. That night, I told my mother. She listened, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. Just remember, she said finally, this isn't just about proving Greg wrong, this is about proving yourself right. Her words settled in my chest. She was right. Revenge might be sweet, but survival, success, that was the real victory. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed one last time. Another text from Greg. Lisa, if you don't show up tomorrow, you'll regret it. I smiled in the dark. He had no idea how much I was looking forward to showing up. Friday morning, I dressed differently than I ever had for that office. No neutral blouses or conservative flats. I chose a tailored charcoal suit, sharp lines that made me feel taller, stronger. My mother had insisted on ironing it the night before. Go in looking like the boss, she'd said. Walking through the lobby doors felt like stepping into a memory. Only this time, I wasn't dragging garbage bags behind me. This time, I held my head high, a leather folder tucked under my arm. The security guard did a double take when I approached the desk. Last week, he'd avoided eye contact as I was escorted out. Today, he cleared his throat nervously. Morning, Ms. Rivera. What brings you back? I slid a business card across the counter. Henderson Shipping. My name beneath, independent consultant. I'm here for the Henderson implementation meeting, I said evenly. His eyebrows shot up, but after a quick phone call, he handed me a visitor badge. 15th floor, conference room B. I pinned the badge to my suit jacket, smiled politely, and stepped into the elevator. The doors opened, and almost immediately I ran into Tristan from legal. He nearly spilled his coffee. Lisa, he sputtered. What are you... how... Working. I cut in smoothly, brushing past him. Every step toward the conference room felt electric, like the whole building was holding its breath. When I opened the door, Henderson and 2 of his board members were already seated. They smiled when they saw me. Lisa, good to see you, Henderson said, standing to shake my hand. Glad you could join us. Happy to help, I replied, my voice steady even as adrenaline coursed through me. Behind Henderson, I spotted Naomi and Spencer from marketing. Their eyes widened when they saw me, relief flickering across their faces. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door swung open. Greg strode in, flanked by Tristan and a young woman I recognized only from the hallways. Maya, a recent hire. Greg's smile faltered when his eyes landed on me. What is she doing here? he snapped, his voice cracking slightly. Henderson didn't miss a beat. Ms. Rivera is here representing our interests. Given her deep knowledge of the project, it's only logical she be involved. For a moment, the room went silent. Greg's face twitched as he tried to recover, forcing a laugh. Well, of course, if that's what you want. But surely my team can handle— Your team couldn't answer basic questions last week. Henderson interrupted sharply. We won't waste more time. Lisa stays. The power dynamic shifted in an instant. Greg sank into his chair, his jaw tight. I sat across from him, my calm expression hiding the storm raging inside me. The meeting began. Henderson laid out the agenda, then turned to me. Lisa, could you walk us through the logistics model again? Particularly the integration timeline. I nodded, opening my folder. As I spoke, clear, concise, confident, I felt the room leaning in. Even Naomi was scribbling notes. Maya looked utterly lost. And Greg? He sat stiff, clutching his pen so tightly I thought it might snap. At one point, he tried to interrupt. Actually, I think what Lisa means is— No, I said firmly, locking eyes with him. I mean exactly what I said. The silence that followed was thick. Henderson raised an eyebrow but let me continue. It was subtle, but in that moment, the balance tipped. For the first time, Greg wasn't in control. After 2 hours, Henderson called for a break. People filed out for coffee, whispering to each other. Greg cornered me by the window, his voice low and venomous. Clever stunt, he hissed. But if you think this little show is going to last, you're mistaken. You don't belong here anymore. I held his gaze, steady as stone. I belong wherever my clients want me. And right now, that's here. You're sabotaging me, he spat. No, Greg, I said calmly. You sabotaged yourself when you fired the one person who actually understood this project. His face flushed, a vein throbbing in his temple. For once, he had no snappy comeback. When the meeting resumed, I stayed professional, answering questions, clarifying processes. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Greg's silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. By the end, Henderson was smiling. This is the kind of clarity we needed, he said. Excellent work, Lisa. We'll move forward with this revised schedule. He shook my hand firmly. Across the table, Greg looked like he might be sick. Walking back through the lobby after the meeting, visitor badge still pinned to my jacket, I felt eyes on me again. The same curious stares from coworkers who had watched me leave in disgrace a week ago. Only this time, there were no garbage bags, no humiliation. Just me, walking out with my head high. And as I stepped into the sunlight, my phone buzzed with a new message. Not from Greg, from Naomi. We need to talk. Something's happening behind the scenes, and you should know. I stopped on the sidewalk, staring at the screen. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Naomi's text sat on my screen like a blinking warning light. We need to talk. Something's happening behind the scenes, and you should know. We met that evening at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the office. She slipped into the booth across from me, eyes darting to the door like we were doing something illegal. When the barista set down our drinks, she exhaled and slid a thin manila folder from her tote. I shouldn't have this, she whispered, but I can't watch him do this to you. Inside were printouts, meeting minutes, snippets of Slack messages, a copied email chain that made my chest go cold. The first email was dated the night before my firing. Subject line, RIF justification, client relations. Greg had written, we can frame this as downsizing. With Lisa out, I'll maintain continuity as the primary closer and qualify for the transition bonus. New hire, Maya, can stand in on paper while we stabilize. The next was to IT. Please prep a device wipe at 8:40 a.m. and bag personal effects. Access card to be deactivated on arrival. Then a Slack thread that felt like a punch. Tristan from legal warning Greg that Henderson had requested me by name. Greg's reply, "We'll say she left for a better opportunity. Buy us a week." "Lisa," Naomi said softly, "he orchestrated it. He didn't even have another plan. He just thought he could wing it." I stared at the pages until the words blurred. There was nothing dramatic to say. No speech. Just a quiet, immovable truth. I had been used. "Why help me?" I asked finally. Naomi swallowed. "Because you helped me when I started, and because this isn't right." I nodded, slid the folder back toward me, and thanked her. When I got home, I scanned everything and sent it to Ezra with a single line. "What's the cleanest way to use this?" His reply came fast. "Keep it factual. No commentary. Prepare a timeline. I'll draft a letter to the board and to Henderson outlining misrepresentation and breach exposure. You stay calm and professional." I spent the next 2 hours building a timeline. Dates, meetings, the Phoenix trip, the morning of the garbage bags, the calls from Henderson, the botched implementation. I attached Naomi's documents, my offer letter, my termination email. No adjectives, no revenge. The following morning, Ezra sent 2 letters, one to the firm's board and general counsel, another to Henderson's team. The letters weren't threats. They were mirrors. They simply reflected what had happened and what the potential consequences might be if Henderson pulled their contract for cause. By afternoon, Henderson called. "We sent a formal notice," he said matter-of-factly. 72 hours to remedy. If they can't, we terminate and move our business with you as lead consultant. You're covered either way." I thanked him, then sat still for a long time in my mother's living room, my heartbeat finally slowing. There's a difference between vengeance and consequence. I wasn't burning anything down. I was just telling the truth and letting gravity do its work. 2 days later, the firm requested a meeting. Board representatives, HR, legal, Henderson, me, and, of course, Greg. We gathered in a glass-walled conference room on the executive floor. Sunlight poured in, too bright for how small the space suddenly felt. A woman from the board with steel gray hair led the call. "Thank you for joining," she began. "We've reviewed the materials submitted by Ms. Rivera's counsel and Mr. Henderson's notice. We'd like clarity." Greg tried to go first. "This is being blown out of proportion." "Please wait," the board member said, not unkindly. She turned to me. "Ms. Rivera, can you walk us through your timeline?" I did. Cleanly. No raised voice, no dramatics. Phoenix, the contract terms. Henderson's request that I be the point person. The morning of the garbage bags, the device wipe, the visitor badge a week later. When I finished, Henderson spoke. "Our decision to sign was based on Ms. Rivera's work. The misrepresentation to our board, that she had left for another opportunity, put this relationship at risk." Greg leaned forward, palms up. "We had to act quickly. Budget pressures, restructuring." The board member slid a printout across the table. One of Naomi's emails. Greg's transition bonus line glared up from the page. "Mr. Carver," she said evenly, "was this about budget or your bonus?" Silence. Tristan's pen stopped tapping. Henderson's eyes didn't move from Greg's face. For a long 10 seconds, no one spoke. HR cleared her throat. "Given the new information," she said, "we're placing Mr. Carver on immediate leave pending investigation. Implementation leadership for Henderson will transition away from his team." Greg opened his mouth, then closed it again. No watch tapping now, no smirk. Just a smallness I had never seen in him. The board member turned to me. "Ms. Rivera, the firm would like to retain you independently for 90 days to stabilize Henderson and advise on corrective processes. Rate at your proposal. Full authority on the implementation side. We understand you report to Mr. Henderson." I glanced at Henderson. He gave a slight nod. This was what realistic justice looks like. Not a dramatic sacking in the lobby, not a triumphant speech. Just the messy work of putting things back where they should have been. "I accept," I said. After the meeting, Naomi caught me by the elevators. I'm glad you showed them, she whispered. I didn't show them anything they didn't already know, I said. I just put the pieces together. Greg didn't come out of his office. Later, I'd hear he resigned before the investigation concluded. There was no announcement, no spectacle. Just an empty chair and a name removed from the org chart. Consequence, not fireworks. The next 6 weeks were a blur of whiteboards, status calls, and late-night revisions. Henderson's team got their system. Maya learned for real, not as a prop. Naomi stepped up and shined. I invoiced at the end of each week and watched my own letterhead look less strange and more like a future. On a Friday, Henderson walked me to the lobby after our final sign-off. You know, he said, I've been telling people you're not a miracle worker. You're just prepared, and that's rarer than people think. I laughed. I'll take that. Outside, the sky was a hard blue. A courier waited by the curb with a small box I wasn't expecting. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was my yellow mug, world's okayest employee, and the photo of my mother and me in a simple new frame. No note, just a quiet return of what should never have been thrown away. That night, at my mother's kitchen table, we potted a cutting from her hardy jade plant into a new ceramic pot I'd bought on the walk home. Dirt under our fingernails, the good kind. Not revenge, she said, pressing the soil gently. Roots. I smiled and set the pot on the windowsill. The plant looked small there, but steady. It would grow. Greg's 120 messages still sit on my phone, archived and unread. Proof of a week when everything he thought he controlled slipped away. I don't need to answer them. I don't need to tell a story about him. Because the real story is this. 1 week after being told to bounce back, I did. But not to the old place. To my own footing. To work that was mine because I earned it, not because someone allowed it. If you're ever standing in a lobby, staring at garbage bags with your life tossed inside, remember this. You don't owe anyone your silence or your fury. You owe yourself a plan. Keep your receipts. Tell the truth. Build something they can't ignore. And when your phone lights up with desperate messages from the person who underestimated you, you'll be busy, watering your own plant,